The evening sky was heavy with gray clouds, and the city streets shimmered with the reflection of streetlights on wet pavement. It had been raining since noon, leaving the air thick and cold. People hurried across the road, clutching umbrellas and bags, while the little cafe at the corner of the street stayed half-lit and warm. It was the kind of place where strangers often met by chance and sometimes left with memories they never expected. Inside the cafe, Maya sat alone by the window. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone lukewarm. She had been waiting for her friend for more than half an hour. Her short black hair framed her sharp, thoughtful face. She looked calm, but her eyes carried the tiredness of someone who had lived through too much noise. Maya had always been cautious about people, especially strangers. She had learned that kindness did not always mean safety. In her job as a freelance designer, she met many people, some polite, some careless, and a few who did not understand the meaning of distance. As she waited, she scrolled through her phone, half bored, half wishing the rain would stop. That was when Adil walked in. He was tall, dressed neatly, with a confident look that drew attention wherever he went. He smiled easily, a practiced kind of smile that often made people respond the same way. Adil was known among his friends as the man who could turn any dull room into a lively one. He liked being noticed, and more than that, he liked being liked. When he entered the cafe, he noticed Maya sitting alone. Something about her calm posture and distant eyes made him curious. He didn't know her, but something inside him wanted to start a conversation. Perhaps it was boredom, or maybe it was habit. He ordered a coffee and took a seat 2 tables away. For a few minutes, he glanced at her reflection in the window. She seemed lost in thought, unaware of his gaze. Then his phone buzzed. A friend had canceled their evening meetup. He sighed and looked around. There weren't many people in the cafe. Only an old couple in the corner, a man reading a newspaper, and Maya near the window. So he decided to talk to her. "Excuse me," he said as he approached her table with his cup in hand. "Is this seat taken?" Maya looked up. Her eyes moved from his face to the empty chair and then back to her phone. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm waiting for someone." Adil nodded politely, but instead of walking away, he smiled and said, "I'll just sit for a minute if that's okay. It's crowded tonight." It wasn't really crowded, but Maya didn't want to argue. She didn't reply, so he took it as permission and sat down. He began with small talk. "Rainy day, huh? The city looks like a mirror tonight." Maya gave a small, polite nod. "Yes, it does." Adil leaned forward slightly, trying to keep the conversation going. "You come here often?" "The tea here is great. I think I've seen you around." Maya looked at him now more directly. "No, I don't come here often," she said, her tone soft but firm. Adil chuckled lightly, trying to break what he felt was unnecessary tension. "You look like someone who enjoys quiet places. You have that artist's face." Her expression didn't change. "Maybe," she replied. "But I also like peace." Something about the way she said peace made Adil pause. He smiled again, though it was smaller this time. "Fair enough," he said. There was silence for a few seconds. The sound of raindrops tapping the window filled the space. Adil thought maybe he should leave, but before he could, he noticed a small sketchbook lying on the table beside her phone. "You draw?" he asked, pointing toward it. Maya hesitated. "Yes, sometimes." "That's cool," he said, reaching out as if to take a closer look. But before his fingers could touch the book, Maya quickly moved it away. "Please," she said sharply, "don't touch my things." Adil blinked, a little surprised. He laughed lightly, trying to turn it into a joke. "Hey, I'm not stealing it. Just curious." Her voice became steady, quiet but clear. "I said don't touch." For a moment, Adil stared at her. Something about being told no made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to it. He leaned back in his chair and said, "You don't have to be so serious. I was just being friendly." Maya didn't reply. She turned her eyes back to the window. Adil, trying to ease the tension again, smiled. "You know, you should relax a bit. Life's not that hard." Still no answer. Then, in a small act of careless confidence, he reached forward and gently tapped her arm to get her attention. "Hey, I was just kidding," he said. Maya's body stiffened instantly. She turned toward him, her face cold and pale. Her eyes burned with something between fear and anger. Her voice came out in a low, shaking whisper, sharp enough to cut through the quiet room. "Touch me again," she hissed, "and I'll take your blood." The cafe went silent. The old couple stopped talking. Even the barista looked up. Adil froze for a moment. He wasn't expecting that kind of reaction. His first instinct was to laugh it off, to make it seem like she was overreacting. So he smiled, not mockingly, but awkwardly, trying to diffuse the situation. "Hey, calm down," he said, raising his hands. "It's just a joke," but his smile only made it worse. Maya's chest rose and fell with fast, uneven breaths. Her friend entered the cafe just then, spotting her and rushing over. "Maya, what happened?" the friend asked, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Nothing," Maya said quietly, standing up. "Let's go." Adil opened his mouth to explain, but she had already turned away. The friend gave him a cold, confused look before leaving with her. The door shut behind them and the sound of rain grew louder. Adil sat there, feeling a mix of confusion and embarrassment. He looked around. The old couple whispered to each other and the barista shook her head slowly. Adil finished his coffee in silence, his earlier confidence now gone. He didn't understand why a small touch had caused such a storm. To him, it had been harmless. But to Maya, it had been something else. A reminder, a line she couldn't let anyone cross. Outside, she walked fast under the rain, her friend beside her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face stayed calm. The rain washed her cheeks, but she didn't know if it was only rain. Inside her chest, a quiet storm had started again, one she thought she had left behind long ago. And in that small cafe, a careless smile had just begun a story that neither of them could stop. For Maya, the memory of that evening played again and again. The way Adil had smiled, the sound of her own voice when she warned him, the quiet eyes of the people watching. It all made her feel uneasy. She had not planned to say those words. They had come out of fear, not anger. She had felt trapped for a brief moment, and the only thing she could do was defend her space. Her friend Nita called her early in the morning. "Maya, are you okay now?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," Maya replied, though her voice said otherwise. "I just don't like when people don't understand boundaries." "I know," Nita said, "but you did the right thing. You spoke up. Most people stay silent." Maya sighed. "Maybe. But I hate that everyone was staring. It made me feel like I did something wrong." Nita paused. "No, you didn't." "He did." Maya tried to believe that, but deep down she knew the world didn't always see it that way. Meanwhile, Adil was sitting in his office, staring blankly at his computer screen. His phone buzzed with notifications. At first, he ignored them. Then one of his friends, Riz, sent him a message. "Bro, you're going viral. What happened yesterday?" Adil frowned and opened the link. His stomach dropped. Someone in the cafe had recorded the moment, from when he touched Maya's arm to when she hissed her warning. The clip was short, maybe 10 seconds, but it spread fast online. The title people gave it made things worse. "Girl warns stranger after unwanted touch in cafe. Touch me again and I'll take your blood." The comments were flooding in. Some supported Maya. Good for her. People should learn to respect boundaries. She was right to stand up for herself. But others mocked her words or tried to defend Adil. He just touched her arm. Calm down. Why so dramatic? Adil felt his heart race. His friends were messaging him nonstop. Some teasing, some warning him to stay quiet. His boss even called him into his cabin. "Adil," the boss said seriously, "this video, is it real?" "Yes, sir," Adil said slowly. "But it was just a misunderstanding." "I didn't mean any harm," the boss sighed. "Intentions don't always matter when something looks bad. Just stay low for a few days. Don't comment online. Let it cool down." Adil nodded, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and confusion. He had never been called out like this before. In his mind, it had been a simple gesture, but now the whole city seemed to be talking about it. Across town, Maya's phone was also buzzing. Messages poured in from friends, colleagues, and even strangers. One message read, "You're brave, Maya. Thank you for showing people it's okay to say no." But others were not so kind. "You made a scene for nothing. Why so aggressive? He didn't hurt you." Maya deleted most of them without reading to the end. She didn't want to feed the noise, but what hurt most were the people she actually knew, some who told her privately that she had overreacted. That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of rain from the night before seemed to echo in her ears. She kept asking herself, was I too harsh? But each time she replayed the moment, she remembered how uncomfortable that sudden touch had felt, how her heart had raced with panic, not anger. No, she whispered to herself. I had every right to say no. Days passed. The video continued to spread. News pages picked it up. Some journalists called it a small incident with a big lesson. Others exaggerated it for attention. People began recognizing both of them. Maya received a message from a women's rights group who wanted her to speak about her experience. She wasn't sure she wanted to. I didn't do this for fame, she told Nita. I just wanted peace. But peace was the one thing she didn't have anymore. Every time she stepped outside, she felt eyes following her, not out of judgment, but curiosity. Some people even whispered, that's the girl from the video. Adil faced a different kind of attention. At work, colleagues avoided bringing up the topic, but he could feel their judgment. In the evenings, he stayed off social media, yet the thought of his face online kept haunting him. He started wondering, did I really do something wrong? He remembered Maya's expression, her trembling voice, the fear in her eyes. Maybe it hadn't been just a joke. Maybe it had meant something deeper to her. For the first time, Adil began to think beyond his own embarrassment. A week later, the cafe owner, tired of the unwanted publicity, decided to take action. He gave the security footage to the police after they received a complaint about public disturbance. Maya was called to give her statement. She was nervous, but calm. She told the officer everything, how she had said no, how he had touched her arm again, and how she had felt unsafe. The officer listened and nodded. Do you want to file a full complaint? Maya hesitated. She didn't want to ruin anyone's life, but she also didn't want to stay silent. No, she said finally. I just want it to stop. I want people to understand it's not okay to ignore someone's words. The officer wrote her statement and promised the matter would be noted for record. Adil was also called in. Sitting in the same office, he felt nervous for the first time in years. The officer asked him, Did you touch her after she told you not to? Yes, Adil said quietly. But I didn't mean to make her uncomfortable. Intent and effect are two different things, the officer replied gently. You need to understand that. That sentence stayed in Adil's mind long after he left the station. A few days later, he decided to message Maya, not through social media, but directly through email. His message was short. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how my action affected you. I've been thinking about it a lot. I understand now that I crossed a line. I hope you find peace. Maya read it, her fingers still on the mouse for a long time. She didn't reply, but for the first time in days, she felt her heart relax just a little. Maybe he had finally understood. By the end of that month, the noise around the video began to fade. Another story took its place online, but the people who had seen it, and the two who had lived it, couldn't forget. Maya went back to her quiet work routine. Yet she noticed something new, messages from strangers who said her words had helped them stand up for themselves. Adil too changed in small ways. He stopped making jokes about personal space. He began listening more when people said no. Sometimes, late at night, he replayed that scene in his head, not with anger anymore, but with a strange kind of humility. The rain had long stopped, but both carried the memory of that evening like a lesson written in water, brief, yet impossible to erase. 2 weeks had passed since the cafe incident, but for Maya and Adil, the world still felt heavier than before. Maya had tried to return to her normal life. She worked from her small home studio, designing posters and logos for clients, but every time she sat at her desk, her phone buzzed with messages, news updates, or emails from strangers who had seen the video. Some called her brave. Others called her rude. The constant noise made it hard to focus. Her mother, who lived in another city, called one morning. Maya, I saw your video, she said in a worried tone. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I didn't want to worry you, Amma, Maya said quietly. It's not a big thing now, her mother sighed. I'm proud you stood up for yourself, but people can be harsh. Just be careful what you say online. I know, Maya said, forcing a small smile. I'm being careful. After the call, Maya closed her laptop and looked out the window. The sun was bright that day, but inside her things still felt cloudy. She wondered if speaking up was always this hard, not the act itself, but living with the echo that followed. Meanwhile, Adil was living through his own silence. He had stopped going out with friends, stopped posting pictures online, and avoided every conversation that could lead back to that night. He thought time would fix everything, but it hadn't. Everywhere he went, he felt eyes following him. At work, people greeted him politely but kept their distance. A few friends still supported him, saying, "Don't worry, it'll blow over." But others had started avoiding his calls. One afternoon, his manager called him into the meeting room. "Adil," she said, "the management has received a few complaints about your behavior outside work. We know it's a personal matter, but the company's reputation is at stake." Adil's chest tightened. "Are you saying I'll lose my job?" The manager looked sympathetic but firm. "Not if you cooperate. We're arranging a short workshop on workplace ethics and consent awareness. I think you should attend." He wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. "Okay," he said softly. That evening, he attended the first session in a quiet office hall. The trainer, a calm, middle-aged man, began with simple examples about personal space, communication, and respect. At first, Adil thought it was unnecessary, but then the trainer showed short stories, messages from people who had faced similar experiences. He talked about how even small actions, a word, a look, a touch, could trigger fear in someone who had once been hurt. Adil sat silently, his head bowed. For the first time, he began to understand how Maya might have felt. It wasn't about the touch itself. It was about the memory it might have awakened. When the session ended, he stayed back to talk to the trainer. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said quietly. "But I did, and now I don't know how to fix it." The trainer gave him a gentle smile. "Sometimes the first step is to listen. Truly listen, without defending yourself." Adil nodded slowly. At the same time, the video had reached people beyond their city. A local journalist, Sarah Malik, who ran a small community blog about social behavior, reached out to both Maya and Adil. She wrote, "I'm preparing a story not about blame, but about learning. If you're willing, I'd like to hear your side," calmly and honestly. Maya didn't reply at first, but after a few days she agreed under one condition: no hate, no drama, just truth. Sarah met Maya in a quiet cafe, not the same one as before. Maya looked composed, but her fingers fidgeted with the cup of tea. Sarah began gently, "What made you react that way that night?" Maya thought for a long moment before answering. Because it wasn't just about that moment. It was about every time someone didn't listen when I said no. It was about every time I had to smile just to stay safe. Sarah nodded, taking notes slowly. "And what did you feel afterward?" "Tired," Maya said simply. "I didn't want attention. I just wanted peace." Later that week, Sarah also interviewed Adil. He arrived looking nervous, dressed plainly, without his usual confident smile. "I made a mistake," he said right away. I didn't understand how serious it was. When she told me not to touch her, I should have respected that. I thought I was being friendly, but now I see it differently. Sarah asked, "Do you think you've learned something from all this?" Adil looked down for a moment, then said, "Yes. I learned that respect is not about what we intend. It's about what the other person feels." Sarah smiled softly. That's a good start. When the article was published online a few days later, it carried the headline, "Two Sides of One Moment, a Lesson in Respect." To everyone's surprise, the story was balanced, calm, and thoughtful. It didn't attack either side. Instead, it showed how a single misunderstanding could teach an entire community about personal boundaries and communication. The comments under the article were different this time. People wrote things like, "I respect both of them for speaking up. Maybe we all need to listen better." For the first time in weeks, Maya felt a small sense of relief. The noise was still there, but now it was softer, more thoughtful. Adil, too, felt lighter. The shame he had carried began to turn into understanding. A few days later, by coincidence, they saw each other again. It was at a small bookstore downtown. Maya was browsing art books while Adil had come to buy a novel for the workshop reading list. When their eyes met, there was an awkward pause. Adil froze, unsure if he should walk away or speak. Maya noticed his hesitation and gave a small nod, not of friendship, but acknowledgement. Adil took a deep breath and stepped forward slowly, keeping a respectful distance. "Maya," he said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you. You taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn." She looked at him for a long second, her expression calm. "Understanding is good," she said quietly. "Just make sure it stays that way." He nodded and she turned back to her book. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, only quiet strength. As Adil left the store, he felt a strange peace. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close and maybe acceptance. That night, both of them sat in their own rooms miles apart, thinking about how a single evening had changed so much. For Maya, it had reminded her of her voice, that she could protect herself and others by speaking up. For Adil, it had broken the wall of his easy confidence and replaced it with humility. And for everyone who had watched the video, it had become more than just a story. It had become a lesson, one about listening, respect, and the quiet power of understanding another person's pain. The storm that had started with a single careless touch was finally settling. The rain had stopped outside long ago, but inside both their hearts, new beginnings were just starting to grow, quietly, like sunlight after a long night. Weeks turned into months, and though the online attention had faded, the real-life effects still lingered quietly for both Maya and Adil. The incident had changed the rhythm of their days. Some things looked the same on the surface: work, routines, daily chores, but deep inside, both of them were no longer who they once were. For Maya, life had become a mix of relief and fatigue. The noise around the video had finally settled, but it had left behind echoes, quiet whispers in public, sudden questions from people who barely knew her, and unexpected messages from strangers who saw her as a symbol of courage. She appreciated the support, but she didn't want to be seen as a hero. She just wanted to be seen as human, someone who had faced a difficult moment and survived it. One evening, as she walked home from the market, a young college girl stopped her on the sidewalk. "Excuse me, are you Maya from that video?" she asked hesitantly. Maya paused, unsure what to say. "Yes," she said slowly. The girl smiled nervously. "I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I stopped someone from crossing my line too. I remembered your words." Maya's heart softened. "I'm glad you did," she said quietly. "Always speak up for yourself." The girl nodded, her eyes bright, and walked away. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt warmth in her chest, a small spark of purpose. Maybe something good had come out of all that pain. Across town, Adil was also learning to rebuild himself, piece by piece. His job had kept him busy, but his social circle had changed completely. Some friends had left, not wanting to be associated with him after the scandal. Others stayed, but the jokes were gone. He didn't mind. He didn't want the same old crowd anymore. Every Wednesday evening, he attended a local community workshop called Listening Circle, where people came to share experiences about respect, empathy, and communication. At first, he had gone just to fulfill his company's requirement, but slowly it became something more. In those sessions, he heard stories that humbled him, stories of people who had been ignored, misunderstood, or treated unfairly. Each story was a reminder of how his one careless action had hurt someone deeply. One day, a woman in the group said something that stayed with him. "Real change," she said, "is not about saying sorry once. It's about how you choose to behave when no one is watching." That night, Adil couldn't sleep. Her words kept circling in his mind like a quiet echo. He realized change wasn't a performance. It was a habit, one that had to grow slowly. Meanwhile, Maya started spending her weekends volunteering with a small women's support group that helped others who had faced uncomfortable experiences. She didn't talk about her own story much, but her calm presence helped people open up. One afternoon during a workshop, a young woman shared how she had never reported an incident because she thought no one would believe her. Maya gently said, "Sometimes people won't understand right away, but you still have to speak your truth. You can't carry silence forever." Everyone in the room nodded. It was then Maya realized how her one act of courage had quietly started a chain. People were learning to speak, not to fight, but to be heard. But while things seemed to move forward, Both Maya and Adil still carried invisible scars. There were moments when Maya would suddenly freeze if someone stood too close in a crowd. There were days when Adil avoided public places altogether because he feared being recognized. They both had learned that actions have long shadows. They don't disappear easily, but they can guide new paths if one is willing to walk with awareness. One day, Adil received an unexpected invitation in his email. It was from the same journalist, Sarah Malik, who had written the earlier article. She was organizing a community panel on respect and responsibility in everyday life. She wanted both Maya and Adil to attend, not as rivals, but as voices of learning. At first, Adil hesitated. He didn't know if Maya would even want to see him again. But after thinking for a few days, he replied with a simple yes. When Maya got the same invitation, she too was uncertain. She didn't like public attention, but she trusted Sarah's calm approach. "It's not about reopening wounds," Sarah had written. "It's about helping others learn from what both of you already lived." So, Maya agreed. The day of the event arrived. The hall was filled with young students, teachers, and working professionals. A small banner hung behind the stage. "Respect starts with listening." Maya sat on one side of the stage, dressed simply, her expression thoughtful. Adil sat on the other, quiet, his posture humble. When Sarah introduced them, the room fell silent. She began by summarizing the story, not with drama, but with calm honesty. Then she turned to Maya first. "Maya, looking back now, what would you say to people who think you overreacted that night?" Maya took a deep breath before speaking. "I'd say this, and it's not about one moment. It's about how that moment feels inside you. When someone doesn't respect your no, it's not small. It reminds you of every other time your voice didn't matter. I reacted from fear, not anger." The audience listened quietly. Then Sarah turned to Adil. "And you, Adil, what have you learned since then?" Adil's voice was calm but full of emotion. "I learned that being good-hearted isn't enough. You have to be aware. I used to think a smile could fix everything. But now I know sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is give space and listen." There was a moment of silence followed by soft applause. Sarah smiled. "That's why we're here today, to understand, not to judge." After the session ended, people came up to thank them. Some took notes, others shared personal experiences. Maya and Adil spoke briefly with Sarah and then stepped outside the hall. The air was cool and quiet. For a moment they stood there, unsure what to say. Finally, Adil spoke. "I'm really grateful you came," he said. "You didn't have to, but you did." Maya looked at him calmly. "We both had to," she said softly. "Not for each other, but for everyone who's still learning where the line is." He nodded. There was no bitterness, no fear, only understanding. In the days that followed, their lives began to settle into a quiet balance. Maya continued her art and volunteer work. She found peace in small things, early morning walks, painting, and helping others find their voice. Adil, too, found purpose in change. He started helping with the same community sessions, not as a guest, but as a volunteer. He never spoke about his past unless someone asked. But his presence alone showed what growth looked like. Not loud or dramatic, but steady and sincere. Both of them had learned the same lesson from different sides. Respect is not just about words. It's about awareness, action, and humility. Months later, as another rainy evening filled the city streets, Maya passed by the same cafe where it had all begun. She stopped for a moment, watching the familiar glow of its windows. Inside, new people laughed, drank tea, and talked about their own lives. The place looked peaceful again. She smiled faintly, then walked away, not with fear but with calm strength. Some stories don't end with revenge or bitterness. Some end with understanding, and this was one of them. It had been almost a year since that evening in the cafe. The memory still lingered in both Maya and Adil, but it no longer carried the sharp edges of fear and confusion. Time had softened the pain, leaving behind lessons and a quiet understanding of themselves and the world around them. For Maya, the past months had been a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. She had returned to her work as a freelance designer, but had also made space for volunteer activities that helped others learn about boundaries and respect. She had discovered a small but important truth. Her voice mattered, and so did her choices. One Saturday morning, Maya walked through a small park near her apartment. Children played on the swings. Couples strolled along the paths. and the faint hum of the city was softened by the bright warmth of sunlight. Maya found a bench and sat down, opening her sketchbook. Her pencil moved easily across the page, capturing the simple joy of the scene. As she sketched, a young girl approached her hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Maya?" the girl asked softly. Maya looked up, recognizing the same mixture of curiosity and respect she had seen in others before. "Yes," she said gently. The girl smiled. "I saw your story online. I wanted to tell you. Because of you, I learned to speak up for myself. I said no when someone tried to bother me, and I didn't feel afraid after that." Maya's heart warmed. She nodded. "That's wonderful. Always trust yourself and your feelings." The girl ran off, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. She realized that her small act of courage had grown far beyond the cafe. It had become a ripple, touching lives she had never met. At the same time, Adil was sitting in his small apartment, preparing notes for the next community workshop he would attend. He had grown used to these sessions, finding purpose in listening, sharing, and helping others understand the importance of consent and respect. He remembered the first day he had walked into the listening circle, embarrassed, defensive, unsure of what he had done wrong. Now he was quieter, more reflective, and more aware of the impact of his actions. He had even started writing a journal, documenting what he learned from each conversation. Every reflection reminded him of that night in the cafe, not as a moment of shame, but as a turning point. He understood now that growth came from facing one's mistakes, not ignoring them. One evening, Adil received a message from Sarah Malik, the journalist who had interviewed both of them months earlier. "We are organizing a small community panel on respect and communication. We would like both of you to participate. It is not about blame, only learning. Are you willing?" Adil read the message carefully and replied immediately. He had learned that avoiding the past did not erase it. Facing it responsibly with humility could create understanding. Maya received the same message. She hesitated but then agreed. It felt right, not for confrontation, but to help others see the lessons they had both learned. The day of the panel arrived. The room was filled with students, young professionals, and parents. The banner behind the stage read, "Respect and understanding start with listening." Maya and Adil were seated on opposite sides of the stage. Their eyes met briefly, acknowledging the shared past, but without tension or fear. Sarah began summarizing the story simply, without exaggeration or judgment. Then she turned to Maya. "Maya, how do you feel looking back at that night now?" Maya took a deep breath. "I feel I'm stronger. I was afraid, yes, but I also realized that speaking up is not only for myself. It is for everyone around me. It's about letting others know that their voice matters too." The audience listened quietly, nodding. Sarah then turned to Adil. "And you, Adil, what did you learn?" Adil paused, choosing his words carefully. "I learned that intentions are not enough. Just because we mean no harm doesn't mean the other person feels safe. Respect is about awareness, listening, and acting carefully. I've learned that one small action can have a big impact, and it's my responsibility to be aware of that impact every day." Soft applause filled the room. Sarah smiled. "Thank you both. This is not about blame. It is about learning, growing, and helping others understand that respect is the foundation of any healthy interaction." After the session, people approached them. Many shared personal experiences. Others asked questions about handling uncomfortable situations, and a few thanked them for their honesty. Maya and Adil spoke calmly, neither seeking attention, but both realizing the quiet power of sharing the truth. As they stepped outside, the evening sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. The city seemed calmer, softer, and more forgiving than before. Adil broke the silence. "I wanted to say, thank you for coming today. It means more than I can explain." Maya looked at him calm and confident. "It's not for me," she said. "It's for everyone who still needs to learn. For people who are afraid to speak or people who need to understand." He nodded slowly. For the first time, he felt not just relief but responsibility, the kind that stayed with a person quietly, guiding their actions without show. Months passed. Maya continued her work as an artist and volunteer. She found joy in small routines, morning walks, painting, and helping others find their voices. Each day reminded her that strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with honesty. Adil also continued his quiet work in community sessions. He never forgot the lesson from the cafe. He spoke less, listened more, and understood that respect and awareness were ongoing efforts, not just moments of apology. One rainy evening, Maya walked past the same cafe where it all had begun. The warm light from the windows reflected softly on the wet pavement. People inside laughed and drank tea, unaware of the story that had unfolded there months ago. Maya paused for a moment. She thought about fear, courage, mistakes, and growth. She thought about the young girl she had helped, and about the man who had learned the weight of a careless gesture. Then she walked on, feeling calm and steady. Adil, meanwhile, was leaving a workshop across town. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening and quiet. He looked up at the sky and thought about the journey he had taken, from carelessness to awareness, from misunderstanding to humility. He smiled faintly, not arrogantly, but with quiet satisfaction. Change was not instant, but it was possible. In the end, neither Maya nor Adil needed to forgive or forget completely. They had learned the truth of their actions and the value of responsibility. They had shown that respect was not a moment, but a habit. That courage was not only in confrontation, but in persistence, and that growth was possible when people chose to listen, reflect, and act with care. The storm that began with a single touch had passed. It had left ripples, lessons, and understanding. Life went on, but both of them carried its wisdom with them, quietly, humbly, and with the promise of kindness and awareness in every choice they made from that day forward. And sometimes, that was all a story needed. Not drama or revenge, but truth, reflection, and the quiet power of learning from what had been.